Don't aim for certainty and beware the temptation to chase after feelings of illumination and revelation as if they could solve this central question of human life, because purpose and meaning really are the core challenges that we have to face. And I believe honestly that the true mark of maturity is to honestly accept ambiguity and embrace the uncertainty with a sense of gracefulness. This video is my direct response to a question that I received from Charlie, which I'm going to bring up on the screen and read to you right now. So Charlie asked, after being several years deep on her healing journey and in that pendulum swing between lightness and darkness, how does she progress? She says that her work is already meaningful to herself and those that she serves. However, she's still feeling a sense of being ungrounded. So her question: what are some tangible ways to gain clarity on the expression of the gifts you are here to give, and how to serve them in the most meaningful way that also serves your soul? Is this something sought after, or does it come in natural divine timing? Well, Charlie, thank you for the question, and you're obviously someone who really doesn't need that basic level response of what do I do with my life? You're not fresh out of high school. This strikes me more as the kind of reflection that comes to someone who's approaching more towards their middle age, or maybe someone who's in their 20s, maybe their late 20s, and already has tried a few things but is feeling a bit uncertain about what else is missing. It's not obvious feeling of pain or bleeding. It's more of that nagging sense, perhaps, that something isn't right. And as you say, I'm ungrounded in myself. Well, what does that mean to be ungrounded in yourself? Most obvious meaning is you're not actually engaging in the present moment around you. That's the number one invitation. To get grounded in the moment around you means to look where you're standing and actually take up agency and residency in the rooms that you find yourself in. This means serving family, serving community, serving yourself in the day-to-day, mundane, boring responsibilities of life, because the major trap that I see, as I hinted at in the introduction, is this idea that we're chasing after feelings of illumination and revelation. And I just don't think this works for people who are trying to find clarity about their path in life. There's a small number of people, the prophetic type, let's say, who will receive visions and fantasies of how they're meant to serve the world, but very rarely, even in this small number of people, will that not be something which isn't a spiritually grandiose, self-pedestalizing, self-inflating vision of their golden shadow. It's something to aim towards. It truly is that pinnacle that we march towards throughout the whole of our life and collapse dead in front of, still many miles away from. We can't really concretize a truly beautiful dream or a vision. It just doesn't work that way. It gives us hope. It gives us inspiration. It gives us the meaning to move forwards. It gives us something to aim towards, and that meaning that is in the journey itself. But we would be mistaken to try and aim towards something too grandiose and too lofty. I think I'm going to give an analogy that really captures the question from my perspective, or maybe a metaphor, let's say. I want you to imagine, classic example, I know, maybe cliche, that you are the master of your fate and the captain of your soul, and you're on a 17th century galleon, and you're turning the wheel, and it's a stormy, dark night, and you're the only person on the ship of your soul. And you're looking for the lighthouse, you're looking for the revelation and the illumination, and of course you are, because you are terrified of not getting this right, and the stakes are genuinely high. At any moment, a wave could collapse your ship and end it all. This is the common analogy that people would relate to if they're in that moment of existential dread and not really feeling grounded in themselves. They don't really feel like they are truly the master of their fate and the captain of their soul. And yet, what if it wasn't the lighthouse that we should aim towards? What if it wasn't actually the dark night which surrounded us, but actually we're wearing a pair of sunglasses, and as soon as we take them off, it's suddenly daytime, and we don't even need to aim towards the lighthouse. Of course, that's the peak experience, and you'd actually be completely blinded by the light, and you need to put them back down again. And progressively over time, you can kind of, readjust and realize, oh wow, it's day. And if the metaphor isn't strikingly obvious based on the examples I bring forwards on this channel, those sunglasses are the lens of trauma. It's the unresolved blackness and the unresolved darkness which I see as creating the major inhibitions for someone in regards to their clarity about what the next steps might be. Because sure, we can aim towards that lighthouse, and maybe we remember from something we've read or someone who gave us wonderful advice that the lighthouse might exist several miles that way. But the easiest gains, and honestly the quickest way to ground yourself in reality, is to realize where your 2 feet are actually planted, and realize that you might have a distortive lens that's perceptually locked onto your face. I don't even think that sunglasses are the best example, to be honest, Charlie. It's more like a contact lens. They're so embedded into our perception. This is how trauma works. This is how distortion works at any level of, I suppose, cognitive disconnect. We see darkness all around us. We see uncertainty all around us. And if you're already at the stage where you've done a lot of trauma work, this may not apply so much. But what does still definitely apply is the duty and the responsibility to attend to the world around you. If you're sailing the ship, there are various tasks and responsibilities which must be done so that ship does not sink. And if you are looking after a family or engaging in a community, there are really boring, mundane things to do, and we can't chase after feelings of clarification. I think the big mistake that we make when we're starting to get in touch with something like our soul's true calling is that we expect it to be a fanfare of angelic trumpets singing from the clouds, announcing our path and our purpose like the lighthouse or like an angelic host which beckons us towards the heavens. And it's just nonsense for the majority of people. There's a huge difference in the path and the purpose of a mother of 2 who's in her 30s and trying to figure out how to make it work with family, relationship, mothering, and also a sense of individuation, as opposed to the young man in their 20s who's on an engineering pathway and focused on very concrete problems, or maybe an artist in her 50s who's already past that middle passage period in their life, and they're no longer seeking a sense of identity, but rather how they can ground that in. And of course, it goes back to what I invited at the start of this question response. Just take note of where you are and see if you can bring in more presence and more purpose, and crucially, grace and gratitude for the opportunities which are in front of you. I'll look back at the question in a moment, see if I can actually find it back up. My screen's locked up. There's another point that I wanted to respond to, Charlie. You mentioned in particular, this is it, how do you serve them for yourself and also serve your soul? This is a wonderful high-level awareness, and it's the reason I chose this question, because you're clearly past a point where it's about selfishness versus selflessness. You are already at that integral stage where you realize that it's a symbiotic, not symbiotic. Simba, maybe we can go down a Lion King example, but a symbiotic relationship between a genuine service and a genuine receptivity. Sure, there might be a huge area of your life, there may be a contact lens that needs to be pulled out of the eye, a trauma lens or 2, but if you've already done that work and you're truly at the stage where things seem pretty meaningful and they seem pretty healthy and pretty happy and generally quite loving and engaged, but it still doesn't feel right, it's really a question of who are you serving and who is the self that serves. And if you're aware of shadow dynamics and the nature of the human unconscious, the mark of the mature person, as I mentioned in the introduction, is the ability to realize that we will have shadow material and indecisiveness which will always snap and bite and gnarl on our sense of certainty, because a truly intelligent, a truly emotionally intelligent and cognitively intelligent person will always be able to second guess themselves. And I would say that it's a mark of immaturity to get fixed onto one path only and ignore all other options without having truly considered them, or at least seen the possibility that it could be possible. Maybe I'll break that down there, summing it back up. There's a difference between the person who commits to one career path, or let's say commits to a marriage, and knows that it might not work, They truly can see their flaws, they can see their partner's flaws, they recognize their shadow tendencies, and they recognize the ways that their partner might betray them, and yet they still make that choice to commit. They still engage meaningfully in life. They still choose to captain their ship and to ground themselves in the room that they are in, literally this moment, with a background awareness that doesn't become hopefully an inner critic chomping away and always challenging your sense of solidity. That's a different story. But if you're 90% certain and 10% ambiguous, and you know that things could fall apart, and you are aware that you are an individual who came from a family within a town or a city, within a culture, within a country, on a planet, there are so many factors outside of our control. The gracefulness truly does seem like the only sane option when there's so much chaos that we could potentially encounter and could potentially swallow us up at any moment. So I hope this answers your question, Charlie. We've gone over a variety of different areas. Of course, groundedness means being where you are and having grace and gratitude for the opportunities in front of you. And if you do want to have that feeling of certainty and understanding gifts and how to give those gifts, I think it is a question of doing the mundane daily responsibilities which are immediately before you, rather than chasing for revelation and transcendence. There's a moment for that, and it's usually a very particular season in our life where we'll get a lot of visions or revelations, but in the day-to-day, year after year, living the life that you choose, it's 90% certainty, being aware of the ambiguity, and yet still progressing nonetheless. I hope this answers your question, and for everyone else who's listening in, I put a pinned comment down below. Feel free to get involved if you want your question answered in the next episode. In the meantime, why not go straight over to the next question, where it's going to be like this, but obviously not like this, because it's a completely different question. It's right over there, and I'll see you over there.